you know. But anyway, once we were separated from the AUB, true to his personality, my dad started working to organize a community. We were living in Mesa, and I have to say, most fundamentalists don't proselyte the same way that the church does. There's a sense that the church's responsibility is to pass out the first principles to all the world, and that Mormon fundamentalism is something you're supposed to seek. They're not going to go seek you out. It's the higher doctrines, and so, you know, and my dad never agreed with that. You know, he wanted to be out and he wanted to be a missionary, and so he asked me, because I'm a writer, to start writing pamphlets. And so, you know, I have to say I'm pretty young. I'm still in my early 20s at this point, and so I sat with this pad of paper on my lap going, what am I going to write about, you know? And my dad ordained me to the office of 70, which, you know, they really don't do in the mainstream LDS church like they did in the old days, but he ordained me a 70, which is called to be a missionary to all the world. And it was kind of funny. Within days of him ordaining me, it was like my pen loosened up, and I started writing, and I wrote a pamphlet, and then I wrote this pamphlet, and I said, okay, what are we going to do with this? He says, we're going to go pass it out at LDS churches. And I was like, okay. So one Sunday morning, we woke up, we went to the Leahona Ward, attended services, and afterwards, you know, there was 2 egresses after the meeting. My dad stood at one on the sidewalk, I stood at the other, and we made sure that we stood on the sidewalk off a church property, and as cars went by, we were handing pamphlets out, you know. And most people were curious, what is this, you know? One guy came up to me, and in Spanish, he asked me what I was doing, and I said, I'm passing out a message. And he said, oh, can I have one? So I gave it to him. Well, then he came back a few minutes later. He says, I've showed this to the bishop. He wants you to stop passing this out. And I looked at him, I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And he said, but this is church property. And I said, no, this isn't church property. I'm not on church property. And he said, okay, and walked off. And then my younger brother, who was only about 10, comes up and says, you know, our papa is, you know, there's a bunch of men that are yelling at him, you know. So I went over to the other side, and my dad was surrounded by men, and they were yelling at him and calling him Korahor, and, you know, why are you passing this out? Why are you fighting against the church? And my dad was arguing back with them, but my dad, being the business one, as he's arguing, he's handing out pamphlets to every single one of them, you know. So when we walked away, every single guy had a pamphlet. Well, it got to the point, I dreaded Sunday mornings. I'm like laying in bed going, oh, dreading that moment when my dad, all excited, would say, which ward are we going to go to today, you know. And so he wanted us to get the experience of tracting like he had done. So we went to Sanders up on the Navajo reservation, and I had one of my younger brothers-in-laws with me, and I knocked on the door. The first house I came to, the door opens. It's the Mormon missionaries. I just stood there and I laughed, you know. And so I said, you know, I explained I'm a Mormon fundamentalist missionary. I'm a Mormon fundamentalist. What's that? And the lead missionary was a guy from Chicago, and he's like, sure, come on in, you know. And the other missionary's from Utah, and he's like this. So we went in. We had a friendly little debate, and then we said goodbye. And as we were walking away, they get in their car and they are squealing out of there. You know, I'm sure they're heading to the mission president to tell him what they're doing. Okay, so anyway, I'm losing a little bit of time here, but anyway, so I just want to say that I told my dad, this isn't my style of missionary work. You know, I don't feel right doing missionary work this way. And I said, it's not me. He says, oh yeah, well, what way would you do it? And I said, I don't know, but this isn't my way of doing it. And so we stopped doing missionary work that way. And you know, then this is like the late 90s, so the internet kicks up. And I found my milieu, so to speak. I got on the internet from that time forward, and I talked about my lifestyle, I talked about my beliefs. I didn't push my beliefs on anybody, and I let people come to me. This is a picture of us on one of our missionary trips. And anyway, I'll briefly say I had a chance to live plural marriage for 13 years. I separated from my second wife about 5 years ago, and she's kind of asked me not to speak about her publicly anymore because she has her own life and she's moving on, and so I'm going to respect that. I'll post my blog up at the end so that you can, if you want to read the history, it's on the blog. But my second wife, we're still really great friends, and she's asked me not to speak about her. But I want to say that living plural marriage was an experience, a life-changing one, and no amount of studying could prepare me for how difficult that was. And it seemed like no matter what decision I made, I would have one or the other mad at me. So imagine this situation. A wife takes you aside and she says, "You're not being fair. You're favoring her. You're spending all your time with her." And so you calm her down. Then you go into the next room, and the other wife says, "I want to say something to you. You're not being fair, and you're spending all your time with her." So it makes you want to tear your hair out, because which one of them is right? But here's the thing: you can't tell them, any one of them, that they're wrong, because then you invalidate their feelings. So anyway. I went to a fireside once, and I used to hate it at this point when monogamists would get up and bear testimony of the beauty of plural marriage. I would think in my mind, "You don't even know what you're talking about, beauty. What do to you it's academic, And I remember that at this one particular fireside, I got so agitated that I got up and I walked out, and there was this old polygamist, a man with 3 wives, who came out, and for some reason he knew what had bugged me, and he said, "Yeah," he says, "they don't know what they're talking about." But it got to the point where I stopped trying to make them happy, because that's what I was doing. I was stretching myself thin, trying to make all of them happy, and I was becoming very burdened at that. And when I stopped trying so hard, for some reason it started getting easier. And I remember at one particular point, I was listening to Martha and my second wife in the other room play Scrabble while I was in bed reading. And I could hear them laughing and having a good time, and I realized that they liked each other. And I realized for the first time, and this was about a year after I entered plural marriage, that I was happy too. And it seemed like anyway, I'm gonna cut my remarks short. I wish I had more time to finish everything that I had to say, but I just in closing, I want to say that I wanted to express kind of where I'm at. I got thrown out of lots of groups. Right now, I don't belong to any group. I consider myself an independent. We believe in patriarchal order, and I hate using the word patriarchal because it sounds so patriarchal. But I think that the better word to use is familial. Okay, we don't believe in having an organized structure. We believe that every parent should be the head of the church, the president of the church for their family. And we associate with other families that believe kind of the same way. Every husband should be a king and a priest in his home. Every wife should be a queen and a priestess in her home. We believe that the church and group paradigm is something that's ending with the times of the Gentiles, and that we believe that these family structures mirror what's in heaven, and that's what we're striving to achieve here on earth. We also believe in temple work, and even though we don't have temples, we do things in our own homes. We set up our own homes like temples. We meet together. We get everybody together to do endowment sessions whenever we can, which isn't very often. But basically, we want to be left alone in the practice of our religion, and we want to afford other people that same right. I myself have learned through all my excommunications that it's best to question everything. I don't think that any doctrine is so inviolate that you can't call it into question and that it can't bear scrutiny. No leader is infallible. Even the most holy of prophets was capable of putting forth only their own opinion. And nothing is so sacred that it can't be tested. I'm still very much a Mormon fundamentalist, even though Many of my views on culture, religion, music, and politics are decidedly not very fundamentalist. I'm often a sharp critic of my own culture, even though I'm still a part of it. And this culture is needed as a reminder of who we are. Anyway, thank you, Lindsay, for allowing me to speak and for reaching out to Mormon fundamentalists and putting us in a more positive light and treating us with dignity and respect. I'll show you kind of the rest of my pictures. This was my family in 2004. And this was my family just last year at the marriage of my oldest daughter. And that's her husband standing next to her. And then next to the groom is my wife Martha and my former second wife who we wanted included in the family picture. So I blog about my family's experience. Let's see. I'll put that up. Okay. Anyway, I don't know if you can see that. Moroni-family.blogspot.com. That's where I discuss my lifestyle. And then I do music reviews, a lot of indie stuff at www.moroni-music.blogspot.com.